What if your child wasn't entirely human? Would you still raise him? In 1989, I followed my husband into the frozen forests of Alaska, hoping for a new beginning. But he vanished during a hunting trip, and something else found him. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a wolf. It was something ancient. Watching. Learning. I blacked out in a cave, woke up days later, broken, alone, and pregnant. No one believed me. They smelled beer on me. Said I was delusional. But months later, I gave birth to a boy. Taller, stronger, more sensitive than any child I've ever known. I named him Callan, and I kept the truth buried. For 24 years, he was my secret. Until one night he looked at me and said, "They're calling me." Then he disappeared, back into that forest. We searched for him. And when I found him, he was no longer my son, 8 feet tall. Surrounded by them, he looked at me, reached out, and vanished into the trees. Now I sit here, alone, with only one sign he was real. A crumpled paper on my table that reads, "I remember you." I still remember the sound my boots made when they touched the ice-crusted tarmac at Yakutat. A hollow, frozen echo, like the ground itself didn't want me there. The wind cut sideways across the landing strip, carrying that bitter Alaskan cold you don't just feel on your skin, but in your bones, in your teeth. My fingers trembled, even inside the gloves. Maybe from the cold, maybe not. My breath came out in short white clouds, like I was trying not to cry. Like I had something to hide. I stepped down from that cargo plane with a suitcase full of secondhand sweaters and a heart carrying more weight than I could ever name. I told myself I came here for a fresh start, for Reed, for peace. But the truth is, I came here because there was nowhere else to go. Reed had already been here for 2 weeks before I joined. He said the job was decent. The guys at the logging company kept to themselves, and that the place had good bones, whatever that meant. He picked me up in a beat-up Chevy truck that smelled like wet fur and old coffee. He didn't say much, just handed me a thermos that was still warm and nodded toward the road. The drive was long. Trees pressed close to either side of the road, like they were leaning in to listen. Everything looked like it had been dipped in ash. Gray skies, white snow, black trunks. I remember watching the woods blur by and wondering if anything out there was watching back. Reed didn't like small talk. He never had. He was always more of a whiskey and silence kind of man. And when he drank heavy. But that first day he was sober, focused. Said there'd been fresh tracks near the old timber site, and he wanted to check them out before the weekend hunters ruined the chance. Moose, maybe, big ones. He seemed excited in that sharp, twitchy way that made me nervous. Told me to bundle up and bring a book. Said he'd only be gone a couple hours. That he'd be back before the snow started again. We drove north, off the highway, onto a series of roads that turned to dirt, then gravel, then nothing but frost-bitten ruts. Eventually, we stopped at what looked like the carcass of a logging camp, half-collapsed sheds, rusted oil drums, and a trailer with the door swinging open like a broken jaw. "This is it," he muttered, more to himself than me. He parked the truck facing the tree line. I could barely see past it. Just an endless stretch of pine, stretching into something much older than us. He climbed out, grabbed his rifle, and started toward the forest without a word. I stayed in the truck. The heater was weak and made a clicking noise like it was coughing up ghosts. I pulled my coat tighter, opened my book, and tried to pretend that the silence outside wasn't pressing in on the windows. An hour passed. Then, too, the sun didn't set so much as it disappeared, fading behind a curtain of low clouds and winter haze. I looked at the clock on the dash, then at the woods. Still no Reed. The air inside the truck grew cold and stale. I clicked the headlights on, just to feel like I had some kind of control. That's when I saw it. Someone standing between the trees. Far enough away that I couldn't make out a face, but close enough that I could feel the weight of its stare. Tall, broad, still. Like it had always been there and I just hadn't noticed. I blinked, and it was gone. I turned the lights off, then back on. Nothing. The forest was just trees again. But the feeling, that didn't leave. That feeling of being seen, of being measured. I waited, my hands shaking now. I pressed them together, whispered Reed's name under my breath like a prayer. Nothing answered. Then came the first gunshot. Sharp, sudden, far off, but not too far. Then another, never fired more than once. He used to brag that he never needed to. And then, silence. Not even wind. Just the sound of my own breath getting faster. I opened the door, stepped out into the snow. My boots sank with a soft crunch. The cold hit me like a slap. I called out his name. No echo, no answer. The trees in front of me stood still as statues. I grabbed the flashlight from the glove compartment. The beam flickered once, then held. I took a step toward the woods, then another, my heart pounding. I wasn't thinking. I was moving. Something in me couldn't stay put. Something in me had already decided that waiting any longer would be worse than whatever was out there. The snow made every step harder. The flashlight barely cut through the trees. I followed the direction I thought I heard the shots from. My throat dry, my body stiff with fear and cold. Then the smell hit me. Not blood, not gunpowder. Something else. Something wrong. Rotting bark, wet hair, a stench like a carcass buried under moss. I turned, ready to run back to the truck, but something grabbed me. I didn't see it, just felt it. Fingers, no hands, wrapping around my ankle, yanking me off my feet. My flashlight flew into the dark. I screamed. At least I think I did. But the sound was swallowed by the trees. I clawed at the snow, kicked blindly. Something pulled harder, dragging me across the ground like I weighed nothing. Branches slapped my face. Cold burned my skin. I smelled fur. I heard breathing. Close. Too close. Not panting. Not huffing. Breathing. Deep and slow and wet. I think I blacked out. Or maybe I just shut down, my mind refusing to believe any. But before everything went black, I remember one last thing. A sound. A noise that didn't belong to man or animal. It rattled in the base of my skull. Low, almost melodic, like it wasn't made to be heard, but felt, and then darkness. Just like that, I was gone, but not gone enough. Not yet. It was the light that saved me, or maybe it was the fear. I don't know, but when I opened my eyes, still crumpled in the front seat, the cold had crept into my bones and made everything feel brittle. My breath fogged up the inside of the windshield, and for a moment I wasn't sure if I'd imagined it all. The figure in the trees, the gunshots, the dragging. But then I turned on the headlights, and there it was. Something, massive, black, motionless, stood at the edge of the forest, halfway swallowed by shadow. It didn't move when the lights hit it. It didn't flinch or run. It just stood there, like it had been waiting for me to look. My mouth went dry. My hand stayed frozen on the switch. The creature's head tilted just slightly, like it was trying to understand me. Then, just like that, it was gone, vanished between the pines without a sound. I waited. I don't remember how long. Could have been minutes, could have been an hour. My fingers were shaking so badly I dropped the flashlight trying to pick it up. I clutched my coat tighter, stared out into that black tree line, and prayed for Reed to come walking back. But he didn't, and then the sun started to die behind the clouds. I don't remember deciding to leave the truck. I just knew I couldn't stay there. The silence was too thick. The windows felt like they were closing in on me. I called Reed's name again, but the sound barely carried. The forest swallowed it like a secret. Then the gunshots came, 3 of them. Not close, not far. Each one cracked sharp across the ice and echo. Not the way he hunted, not the way he ever fired. My breath caught in my throat. I waited for another sound. Anything. A shout, a rustle, an engine. But nothing came, only silence. And that's when I knew something was wrong. I climbed out of the truck. The air hit my skin like it hated me. My legs were stiff. Snow had crept into my boots. But I moved toward the trees, slowly. Each step louder than I expected. The flashlight's beam was weak now, flickering at the edges. I kept it pointed forward even though I didn't want to see what was ahead. I called out again. Still no answer. Just that smell again. Damp, rotten. Not quite death, but not alive either. The kind of scent that clings to places where nothing has lived in a long time. Then the world tilted. I didn't fall. Not at first. It was more like the ground gave out under me. Like something unseen shifted, and I wasn't in control anymore. The flashlight slipped from my fingers. Something brushed past my ankle. A whisper. A shadow. No. It was a hand, and then it grabbed me. There was no time to scream, just the feel of being yanked backwards. Legs folding under me. My face hitting the snow. The cold slapping every inch of exposed skin. I thrashed, kicked, clawed at the ground, but I was sliding fast. Something strong was dragging me, and all I could smell was wet fur and earth. I caught a glimpse of the sky as I was pulled beneath the trees. Gray, wide open, and already too far away. Then everything went dark, not black. Dark. Alive. I don't remember being carried. I don't remember the journey, but I remember the heat, sudden and wrong. The air around me wasn't cold anymore. It was damp, heavy, close. I think I tried to sit up. I think I tried to speak. But nothing worked. My body was still. My voice gone. Only my mind screamed. The walls were stone. I felt them when I blinked. Jagged. Wet. A faint glow flickered somewhere out of reach. Orange, like firelight behind thick fog. I heard breathing. Close. Not human. Not rhythmic. More like something testing sound. Like it didn't need to breathe, but chose to. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. The presence. It was watching me, studying me, like it had never seen something like me before, and didn't quite know if I was prey, or something else. I faded in and out after that, feverish, lost. Time didn't exist in that place. My skin burned from the inside out. I think I saw things. Dreams. Maybe memories. Maybe warnings. A hand on my chest. Pressure on my stomach. Breath against my neck. Not violent. Not gentle either. Just... Sometimes it was soft. Curious. Sometimes it felt like something was trying to fit into my body. Like it didn't know how. Like it was learning. Every time I thought I could move, something pulled me back. My limbs didn't belong to me anymore. I was floating, burning, breaking, and then quiet. When I woke again, I was still inside that place. My clothes were damp, torn. The cold had returned, but it was different now. My skin stung where the fabric had ripped. I ran my hands down my sides, my thighs, my stomach. I found bruises I couldn't explain, scratches and patterns that didn't make sense. My shirt was torn at the belly. My legs felt weak. I could barely lift my arm, but I was alone. I listened. Nothing. Not even breath. And that terrified me more, because I knew it had been there. I knew it had touched me, and I knew it had left me, on purpose. I crawled toward the light. My fingers trembled against stone. The fire, if it was fire, was dying. Just a faint flicker now, I reached it, sat up. I wanted to scream, but my throat burned. All I could do was breathe and listen. That's when I heard it again. The sound, low, deep, not music, not voice. Something between the two, like a hum made from the earth itself. It seeped through the walls, through my skin, and it told me something I didn't understand. But my body did. It told me to sleep. I don't remember falling, just the sound carrying me under. And for the first time since I came to Alaska, I didn't dream. I vanished. I woke up to darkness that didn't feel empty. It felt aware. Not the kind of dark where you reach for a switch. This was thicker, denser, like something in it was watching me breathe. My wrists ached. My arms were pinned above my head. Not tied, not held by rope or chain, but stuck, locked by the weight of something I couldn't see, couldn't name. I couldn't move. I could barely turn my neck. Cold stone beneath me, warmer than it should have been. Warmer than it had any right to be. At first, I thought maybe I died. Maybe this was the after. Some in-between space where pain still existed, but time didn't. Then the memories came back. Not like a flood, more like broken glass. Images, sensations. My legs dragging through the snow. Breath, wet and close, and not human. The deep pull of something moving just under the surface of silence. The smell, that terrible, rotting, earthy smell. Somewhere between wet fur and old blood and the inside of an animal's mouth. And the worst part? I couldn't remember if I'd screamed. I don't know how long I lay there. Hours, maybe, or minutes that just felt longer, because my mind was clawing at the edges, trying to understand what had happened to me. What was happening still? My shirt was torn across the front. Cold air brushed bare skin that shouldn't have been exposed. I could feel bruises blooming down my ribs and across my hips. My legs stung in patches, like something had scraped them raw. There was blood, but not from any cut I could trace. I remember touching the inside of my thigh and feeling a kind of wetness that didn't make sense. My stomach turned. My mind screamed. I wanted to disappear from my own body. But I couldn't. And I wasn't alone. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. The presence. Close. Too close. Breathing in the shadows. Not fast. Not hungry. Just there. Like it didn't need to move to dominate the space. I heard a sound, low and breathy. Not words. Not language, more like vibration wrapped in breath. And I knew it wasn't meant for my ears. It was meant for some other sense in me I didn't know I had. I started to shake, not from cold, but from the realization that whatever was here, it was trying to understand me. Not kill me, not hurt me, not hurt me. Not yet, but study. Like it was learning me the way animals learn terrain. Through scent, through pressure. I blinked and saw flickers. Firelight, maybe, or something like it. A flickering glow that made the ceiling above me ripple. The walls weren't man-made. They were rough, wet, carved out by time and not intention. The air smelled ancient, like moss and skin and stone soaked in memory. I tried to speak. My voice cracked. Nothing came out. Somewhere deeper in the dark, I heard a slow shift of weight, like something heavy repositioning. I caught movement at the corner of my eye. Too tall, too broad. A shape that walked upright, but nothing about it felt human. Its silence was louder than any scream. I turned my head just enough to see my own body. My shirt shredded, my pants ripped down the leg. My skin marked with small bruises, like someone had grabbed me too tightly, or like something had explored me. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to tear off the skin that had been touched, but I was frozen, not by force, but by fear. paralyzed by the certainty that if I moved the wrong way, whatever was watching would finish whatever it had started. At some point, I blacked out again. Maybe my mind just shut down. Maybe that's the only mercy I was ever given. I don't remember the dreams in full, just impressions. A voice, not a voice, close to my ear. Hot breath laced with something sweet and rotten. A pressure on my chest. Not crushing, just heavy, possessive. My skin remembered more than my mind did. The sound of low, primal murmurs that weren't trying to speak to me. They were trying to sink into me, become part of me. There was no violence in it, but that's what made it worse. It wasn't rage, it was curiosity. Curiosity with hands. I woke to light again, dim, flickering. A fire nearby. I wasn't bound anymore. My arms dropped to my sides like dead weight. My fingers tingled. I sat up, slowly, every joint screaming. My muscles felt pulled, strained, like I'd run for miles while asleep. The fire crackled, just beyond a wall of stone. I couldn't see its source, just the light. I reached down. My pants were still torn. My skin was dirty. Cold sweat slicked my chest, and then I noticed something else. My belly. A dull ache. Not sharp, not urgent. Just present. Like my body was carrying something it hadn't before. And I didn't remember how. Not the moment. Not the act, only the sensation after. And that terrified me more than anything. I pulled my knees to my chest and sat there, rocking slightly, trying to force memory to return. But there was only that blank space, a hole in my timeline where something should have been. I remember whispering to myself, over and over, what did it do to me? I didn't expect an answer, but I felt one. Somewhere inside me. Not a voice, not a thought, just a knowing. I wasn't alone in that cave, and I wasn't alone in my body anymore. When I finally stood, my legs wobbled like a newborn deer. I moved toward the cave wall, where the air felt cooler. I found a gap, narrow, winding, barely passable, but light shimmered at the far end. I didn't think. I moved. Every step away from that place felt like peeling myself out of something wet and wrong. Just as I reached the mouth of the tunnel, I heard it again. A sound, deep and resonant, not from outside, from behind. No, not behind. Inside, it thrummed in my bones, not like a threat, like a lullaby. And before I could take another step, the world tilted again. And sleep came for me like a hand across my eyes. When I opened my eyes again, the world looked wrong. Too bright, too still. The smell wasn't stone anymore. It was rust, gasoline, blood. I was back in the truck. My body was curled into the passenger seat like I'd never left. Snow had crept in through the shattered windows. The windshield was cracked in a spider web from the inside. The door on Reed's side was ajar, groaning slightly in the wind. My shirt clung to my skin, soaked with sweat and something else I didn't want to name. There was dried blood on the dash, on my hands, on the lining of my jeans, but none of it hurt. My hands trembled as I sat up. Everything ached, but not from wounds, from something deeper. A kind of hollow bruising, like I'd been shaken from the inside out. My mouth was dry, my lips split, my legs didn't move right. I blinked at the steering wheel, confused, waiting for the memory to catch up. But there was only snow, and the sound of my breath. I reached for the ignition. Dead. Of course it was. I looked around. No sign of Reed, no tracks, no rifles, just broken glass and an open glove box. Contents spilled onto the floor mat. The air inside the cab was thick with that same bitter musk I'd smelled in the cave. Wet bark, sweat, and something feral underneath it all. It clung to my clothes. It clung to my skin, I climbed out of the truck. The cold hit harder now, like it knew where to find the cracks. My boots crunched through thin ice, but I didn't see any of the tracks that should have been there. Not mine, not Reed's, nothing. Like the forest had wiped itself clean. I turned in a slow circle, hoping for something, anything, to give me direction. But there was nothing but white and silence. I don't remember how long I stood there. Eventually I started walking. It didn't feel like a decision, more like instinct. Like some part of me knew that staying near the truck was worse than freezing to death out in the open. I followed the tree line, not into it. Not this time. I knew what was in there now, or at least I knew enough not to go looking again. My legs didn't cooperate. Every step felt like I was dragging someone else's weight. My ribs throbbed. My knees shook. There was blood crusted down the inside of one thigh, dried stiff, and underneath it, something unfamiliar. A tenderness that made me clench my teeth every time I moved too fast. I didn't think about it. Couldn't. I kept my eyes forward. The wind had picked up. Snow came in waves, like sheets being thrown across the trees. I lost track of the horizon, lost track of time. I just moved. Right foot, left foot, left. Somewhere along the way, I started crawling. My hands went numb first, then my lips, then my memory. I remember seeing a mailbox, red, crooked on its post. Then a porch light. Then everything tipped sideways. I woke up to warmth. Not firelight this time. A real home. Blankets tucked up to my chin. The smell of coffee. The smell of coffee. Bacon. A hum from a radio. Some soft country song I didn't recognize. The kind of tune that drifts in through the walls and makes you feel like you're someone else. Someone safe. I was lying on a worn-out couch, a blanket over my legs, my coat gone. My boots drying near the fireplace. Across from me in a wooden rocking chair sat an older woman with long silver braids. Next to her stood a man, heavy-set, arms crossed, lined face. I didn't know them, but I didn't feel afraid. I didn't know them. They didn't ask questions. Not at first. She brought me soup. He fixed the draft near the window. They let me sleep, and when I finally sat up, dizzy and sore and feeling like I'd survived something that should have ended me, they only asked where I'd come from. I told them I didn't know. Not exactly. The woman, her name was Malia, put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You're safe now." I almost believed her. They had a landline. They called someone, the sheriff, a paramedic, someone with a truck and a stretcher. I don't remember the ride, just the way the snow sparkled in the headlights. Like it was all pretending to be normal again. At the clinic, they ran tests, took vitals, asked if I'd been assaulted. I told them I couldn't remember. That wasn't a lie. Not exactly. They gave me fluids, patched up the bruises. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the slow beep of a monitor. Someone came in. A doctor, pale, younger than I expected. He flipped through the chart, asked me if there was any chance I could be pregnant. I laughed. Then I stopped, because something inside me clenched when he asked. He ran the test twice. When he came back, his face was tighter. He said the test was positive. That I was pregnant. 6, maybe 7 weeks. That's when the buzzing started in my ears, because I'd only been in Alaska for 3. And Reed and I hadn't. The doctor kept talking. Something about dates and how early it was. Maybe a miscalculation. Maybe an anomaly. I nodded, but my mind wasn't listening anymore. My hands were shaking. My stomach turned. I asked if the blood they found could be part of the implantation. He hesitated. Said it was possible, but unlikely. They left me alone after that. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, staring down at my palms. There was dirt still caked in my nails. A faint smell in my hair I couldn't scrub away. A soreness in my hips that didn't feel like bruising. It felt like aftermath. I didn't tell them what I'd seen. I didn't say a word about the cave, or the thing that breathed like it knew me. I kept it all inside, because part of me already knew the truth, and there wasn't a word in the world big enough to hold it. They offered to fly me to Anchorage, said I needed rest, a better facility, maybe even family. I said yes, but what I meant was, I need to disappear, because whatever happened out there, it wasn't over. The first thing I remember about Anchorage wasn't the city. It was the quiet. Not the kind of quiet that makes you feel safe. The kind that creeps in at night and sits on your chest. I moved into my sister Joy's place a week after the hospital cleared me. She didn't ask for the whole story. Maybe she didn't want it. Or maybe she just knew there were things I wasn't ready to say out loud. She let me sleep in the spare room. She bought me peppermint tea. She gave me space. And that was enough. The pregnancy moved fast. Or maybe time just stopped moving the way it used to. The doctors told me everything looked normal, but I could see it in their faces. They were confused. They kept checking dates, kept remeasuring. Every time I came in, there was this hesitation, like the machine wasn't showing them what they expected. They never said anything, not directly. But I knew. I felt it in my bones. This wasn't normal. And then he was born. Quiet. Too quiet. No scream, no cry, just eyes, black as night, wide open, staring up at me like he already knew who I was, like he'd been waiting. He barely moved, barely blinked. The nurses said some babies come out calm, that it was a blessing, but they didn't see what I saw. He didn't feel like a baby. He felt like a presence. I named him Colin. A name I never thought of before. It came out of me like it had been buried there for years. I didn't tell them his father's name. Left that part blank. Because what was I supposed to write? A shadow? A myth? Something I still wasn't sure had a face? I brought Colin home, wrapped in 2 layers of flannel. He barely made a sound. Slept through the night, his first week. Joyce joked that I'd won the baby lottery, that I should count my blessings, but she didn't see the way his eyes followed shadows on the ceiling, the way he stared too long at nothing, the way animals went still when I wheeled him past their cages at the vet clinic down the street. By 6 months, he was crawling faster than any baby should. By 9, he was climbing furniture like it was instinct. He barely spoke, but he listened. Oh God, did he listen. You could whisper his name from the next room and he'd turn his head. You could open a window across the house and he'd flinch. His hearing was sharper than mine. His eyes caught movement I never saw. He hated crowds, hated noise, hated sudden light. But he loved trees. The first time I saw him truly smile, really smile, was when Joyce took us on a weekend drive to Eagle River. We stopped at a pull-off and let him toddle around. He stepped into the tree line like he'd done it 100 times before. No fear, no hesitation. He reached out and touched the bark of a pine like it was something sacred. Whispered to it even. Not words, just sounds. Soft and low. Almost like humming. I watched him from the trail and didn't move, because in that moment he didn't look like a toddler. He looked like someone remembering. I didn't tell Joyce everything, only enough to keep her from pushing. But sometimes I caught her looking at Colin like she wasn't sure what she was seeing. And sometimes I looked at him the same way. His hair grew darker than mine, coarser. There was a patch at the nape of his neck that never laid flat. His back and shoulders stayed warm to the touch even in the coldest months. He hated shoes, refused them by the time he was 3, would kick them off at the door, and run barefoot across the snow like it didn't sting. The pediatrician said he was gifted, that his senses were heightened, that he might have a processing disorder. Maybe a spectrum, maybe just a unique kind of mind. But I knew better, because sometimes, at night, I'd hear him wake up and walk to the window. He'd stand there, silent, just breathing, staring out into the dark like something was calling to him. Or maybe watching. The first time I found a dead bird under his crib, I froze. It wasn't mangled, just placed gently, its eyes still open, its feathers smooth, its beak clean, like it had been given. He was only 4. I asked him if he'd found it outside. He shook his head, said, "It gave itself." I didn't ask what that meant, didn't want to know. I kept a journal during those years. Every night after he went to sleep, I'd write down what he said, what he did, what I felt. Some entries were long, some just a single line. I stared at the dog today. It sat down and wouldn't move. I watched the moon for 3 hours. He asked me if I remembered the cave. I never showed the journal to anyone. I told myself it was for him. For when he was old enough to ask the questions, I was too afraid to answer now. But the truth was, I wrote those pages because I was afraid one day someone would take him from me. And no one would believe he'd ever existed the way he really was. There was one entry I still can't reread without shaking. He woke up crying, said he saw, the one with the yellow eyes, said it's still looking, said it knows his name. He was 5. And I knew, deep down, that whoever or whatever touched me that night in the forest, it hadn't let go. It had just changed forms. He was growing fast. By the time he turned 6, he looked 8. By 7, he looked 10. His voice stayed soft, his words careful. He didn't like mirrors, didn't like recordings of his voice. Said it didn't sound right, like it was missing something. Joyce asked me once, late one night, if I ever thought about going back. To the place it started. To Yakutat. To the cave. I said no, but what I meant was, I think he will. And when he does, I won't be able to stop, because part of him still belongs to it. To the wild. To whatever lives between trees and sleeps beneath stone. To something older than language. Older than fear. And I am just the one who carried it out. He was 24 when he left. That night, everything felt off before I even knew it was wrong. The house had this stillness to it. Too quiet, too clean. Like it had been emptied of something important before I even opened my eyes. I walked past his room and the bed was made. Sheets tucked sharp, the way I taught him when he was 8. Except he never made it like that. Not unless he was saying goodbye. His boots were gone. The compass I gave him when he was 16, gone too. And on the table, next to a half-full cup of coffee that had gone cold, was a folded piece of paper. I read it once, then again. I didn't cry. Not right away. It just said, "They're looking for me, Mom. They never stop. I need to know why. I need to know who I am. Don't follow me." Underneath was a hand-drawn map. The route was clear, west of Yakutat. A trail no one used anymore, deep into the forest. A place nobody had any business going alone. But he wasn't just anybody. I stood there, still barefoot, mug of coffee slipping from my hand. It shattered across the tile like it meant something. The sound barely registered. My hands were already moving, already packing. Because I knew better than to listen to the part where he said, "Don't follow May." He was still my son. And whatever had started all those years ago, it wasn't done with either of us. I called Walt. We hadn't spoken in nearly 3 years. The last time, it ended in shouting. But he picked up on the first ring. I told him everything in less than a minute. He didn't interrupt. He just said, "When do we leave?" By nightfall, we were back in my sister's driveway. Joyce came out the moment she heard the engine. She didn't even ask why we were there. She saw the look in my eyes and knew. She always knew. She brought out the journal. Every entry I'd ever written about Callan. Every observation. Every strange moment. Everything I hadn't said out loud. She'd kept it all. Made copies. Indexed them. "Someone else needs to see this," she said. I knew who she meant. Dr. Owen Thorne. He was a cryptid researcher, if you asked the polite version. A fringe scientist if you asked anyone else. A man who had spent 20 years studying what he called non-human hominids in the Pacific Northwest and Alaska wilderness. I'd seen him on some documentary late one night when Callan was 12. He talked like he believed, not like he wanted to convince you, just like he'd already seen it. I sent him a message, attached 2 scanned pages from the journal. One photo of Colin's footprints next to mine in the snow, twice the size. I didn't expect an answer, but he drove up the next day. Said he'd been waiting for someone like me his whole life. We left Anchorage on a Wednesday. It was still early spring, but the air had teeth. We took 2 trucks. Owen brought gear, motion sensors, trail cams, parabolic mics. Walt brought his shotgun. Joyce brought enough food to last 2 weeks. I brought the map. It felt like déjà vu. Same tree line, same silence, same weight pressing down on my chest the closer we got to that place. But this time, I wasn't alone. We set up camp about 5 miles from the marker Callan had drawn. The trees were thicker than they had any right to be. The trail disappeared halfway in. We cut through by compass, stopping every few hundred yards to mark our path. Owen set up a perimeter with infrared sensors. Joyce stayed close to me, her hand never far from my arm. Walt kept to the back, eyes scanning the tree line like the Marine in him had never gone to sleep. That night we heard the first sound. It came just after midnight. Low, long. A sound that started in the ground and ended in your ribs. Not a howl, not a growl, a note. Like something ancient humming through the bones of the forest. We didn't speak. We just listened. The second night, one of Owen's cameras picked something up. He played it back on a tiny screen by the fire. The footage was grainy. Black and white, but clear enough. It showed a clearing, empty for half a second. Then movement. Then something that used to be him. Taller than any man, barefoot, shirtless, covered in mud and moss and something else I didn't recognize. But I knew his shoulders. I knew the tilt of his head, his walk, the way his arms swung, slow and deliberate. He stepped into the frame and paused, then turned to face the camera directly. His eyes caught the lens. They shined, bright, unnatural, not red, not yellow, but something in between, like moonlight through smoke. Behind him, 2 shapes, larger, broader, covered in shadow. One of them reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. Not possession, not control. More like guidance. We watched the footage in silence. I couldn't breathe. Then Walt said it. "That's your boy." I nodded. I didn't cry. There was no space left in my body for tears. Owen rewound the tape again, paused it just as the second figure leaned in. A face, not human, but not beast, covered in thick hair, eyes deep set, brow heavy, feminine, protective. Joyce whispered, "That's a mother." We all knew what she meant. There was one more clip, just 10 seconds. Colin kneeling by a tree, hands in the soil, digging. The same large shape stood behind him, one arm raised, palm down, hovering over his head. Not touching, just blessing. And I knew then, he wasn't lost. He was being claimed. The forest hadn't taken him. It had welcomed him, and I didn't know if I was here to bring him home, or to finally understand what home meant to him now. The deeper we went into Glacier Bay, the more the forest stopped feeling like a place and started feeling like a presence, not just vast or quiet or old, alive. Like it knew us, me especially, like it remembered me. We crossed a glacial stream where the water ran too cold for May. Half frozen, half moving, Walt found claw marks along a tree trunk, almost 7 feet off the ground. Not bare. The grooves were too clean, too wide apart. Owen measured them, said nothing, just stared at the bark with his jaw tight, like he was trying not to say something that would make it real. Joyce walked beside me, her hand brushing mine every few steps like she was checking I was still here. I think we both felt it. That pull, that slow, sinking gravity like we were descending into something that didn't want us leaving the way we came. The trees started changing, taller, closer, covered in a kind of moss I hadn't seen before. Dark green with streaks of red, almost like veins. The air smelled wet, like rot and earth and something sour underneath. We weren't far from the place Colin had marked. That's when we found the first sign. It was a ring of trees, maybe 8 of them, all leaning outward like something had pushed up from the center. Beneath them, the ground had been cleared, swept, almost. No branches, no animal tracks. Just packed dirt, curved with strange indentations. Owen crouched, took pictures, sketched it, said it looked like a meeting place, said the impressions weren't natural. Some kind of gathering spot, maybe. I didn't need to guess. I could feel it in my chest. Something had stood here, and not alone. Walt found another path branching from the clearing. We followed it up a small ridge, past a fallen pine that had been stripped of its bark in clean spirals. Like fingers had peeled it. Along the path, we started to see markings. Not carved. We started to see markings, imprinted, mud pressed into trees in looping symbols. Shapes that didn't make sense until you stared long enough. Then they looked like eyes. Hands. Birth canals. Something ancient and raw. I saw a shape in the mud that made my stomach twist. A spiral with a handprint inside it. Colin had drawn it once when he was 10. On his bedroom wall. We didn't speak after that. None of us. The woods felt too full of listening. That night, we set camp near a grove of cedar. Walt insisted we rotate watch. Joyce stayed awake with him the first half. I took second with Owen. Just before dawn, one of the cameras triggered. The red light flashed twice, then stopped. No sound. Just a single click. Owen rushed over, pulled the chip, popped it into his tablet. I leaned in behind him, already bracing for something. The picture came up slow. It was Colin. This time there was no doubt. He stood at the edge of the grove, shirtless, barefoot, covered in a thin layer of ash or clay. His body was lean but thick, his spine curved slightly forward. But it was his face that hollowed me out. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't scared either. He looked calm, still, like a statue breathing. 2 others stood behind him, taller, massive, hair down their arms, eyes glowing faint in the infrared light. Their silhouettes were wide, shoulders like tree trunks, long arms that hung almost to their knees. One of them had its hand on Colin's shoulder, and he let it, like it was nothing new. I stared so long I forgot to blink. Owen zoomed in, froze the frame. The image was grainy but clear enough. Colin's eyes reflected the flesh. Not like a human's, like a nocturnal animal. A predator. That's him, I said, my voice barely a breath. Joyce turned to me. Are you sure? I nodded. That's my son. The weight of that sentence almost knocked me down, because the boy I raised was gone, and something else, something part of me but not mine, had taken his place. Walt walked the perimeter that morning and came back white-faced. Said something was following us, always 20 or 30 yards back. Said it never stepped on dead leaves, never made a sound. But the air changed when it moved. That evening, Owen found a new recording on the audio log. A series of low-frequency tones, not animal, not mechanical, measured, rhythmic, almost ceremonial. He played it back through the speakers, and we all stood there, too afraid to speak. Because underneath the sound, under the was a second voice. A whisper, not English, not language at all. But I understood it, not with my ears, with something older in me, something cellular. It was a call, not to us, to him, to Colin, like a summoning. The final night before it happened, We hiked another half-mile beyond the marked trail, came to a place that wasn't on any map. The trees opened into a shallow basin, sunken into the earth, ringed by stones taller than us, like ancient sentinels. At the center was a pit, filled with charred bone and dried moss. Around the rim were more symbols pressed into ash and dirt. Some looked familiar. Others made my throat close. That's when Owen found the last camera. It had been placed there, not by him. The SD card was new. He checked it, hands shaking, and there it was, a clip. Just 30 seconds. Colin, kneeling in the middle of the stone ring. Head bowed, eyes closed, covered in painted symbols across his chest. In front of him stood a massive figure, female by shape. Her hair long, braided in thick ropes, decorated with feathers, bones, strips of fur. She didn't move, just raised one arm, palm out. A ritual, or an anointing. Callan reached up, slowly, and touched her hand with his forehead. The screen went dark. Walt took a step back. He's one of them now. Owen whispered something like a prayer. Joyce just grabbed my hand. And me, I didn't move, because what I saw in that footage wasn't abduction. It wasn't fear, it was reverence. He had been chosen, maybe from birth, maybe from before, and the worst part, a part of me understood. A part of me accepted it, because when something that ancient calls to you, something that lives between bone and shadow, voice and blood, maybe you don't get to say no. Maybe you never did. And as the wind shifted again, carrying the same low hum through the trees, I knew we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't name. Something that had waited a long, long time to be remembered. The snow had started again by morning, not soft or gentle like a postcard, heavy, relentless. It poured from the sky like the earth was being erased in real time. Walt wanted to wait it out. Joyce begged me not to go alone. Owen didn't say anything, just handed me a flare and a satellite beacon, and turned his back like he couldn't bear to watch. I told him I had to go further, just a little more, just to where I saw him. I didn't promise to come back. I think that made it easier for everyone. I carried nothing with me. No gun, no camera. Just a coat, 2 layers of wool, and the compass he left behind. The map he drew had faded, but I didn't need it anymore. My body remembered what paper forgot. Every route, every shift in wind. I followed scent more than trail. Something musky, deep, familiar, like pine needles soaked in memory. I walked past the marked stones, past the tree with the red twisted moss, into a narrow hollow that dipped between 2 glacier-fed ridges. It felt colder there, but not in the way you'd expect. Not weather. Something else, like the air had stopped agreeing to be part of the rest of the world. Time didn't move there. It held its breath with me. I knew the place before I saw it. A space between boulders, barely wide enough to pass through. The ground slick with frost and mud. Trees thin just enough to let through a silver-gray light that didn't seem to come from any sun. And in the middle, nothing. No figure, no sound. Just the hum in my chest. That vibration again, the one that didn't pass through your ears but your marrow. Like memory trying to take shape. I stood still for what felt like hours. Then I heard it. Not a voice, not language. Just sound. Breath pressed into rhythm, like someone trying to remember how to speak. I turned toward it. And there, just beyond the edge of fog, was movement. Something stepped between 2 trees. Too tall, too narrow. The silhouette shaped like someone halfway between man and mountain. I couldn't see his face. The mist wrapped around him like it had been waiting. But he didn't move away. He stood there. Just far enough that I couldn't reach him. Just close enough that I couldn't doubt it. He lifted his hand. Not high. He lifted his hand. Not just enough to let me know he knew I was there. And in that moment, every piece of fear inside me quieted. Because I saw him. My son, Colin. Not the boy I raised, not even the man I'd imagined become, but something more. Something older. He didn't speak, didn't have to. His eyes, God, his eyes caught the light in a way that made the forest dim around them. They glowed softly, like they remembered fire, like they remembered me. I stepped forward. He didn't move. I reached my hand out, slow, open, like I used to when he had nightmares, and crawled into bed beside me. The wind howled through the trees. Not fierce, just enough to blur the moment. My fingers met cold air, and then he was gone. Like smoke, like dream, like the space had folded him back into itself. I didn't chase him. I just stood there. The snow came harder after that. Thicker, blinding. But I didn't leave until I couldn't feel my feet, until I was sure there was nothing else he wanted me to see. I found my way back to camp hours later. My lips cracked, my boots soaked through, my throat raw from breathing in silence. No one asked what I saw. I think they already knew. Joyce made me tea. Walt sat closer than usual. Owen stared at the fire like it had just betrayed him. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window of the cabin we'd rented in Gustavus, staring out into the trees. Waiting, listening. Just after dawn, I noticed it. A sheet of paper on the kitchen table. It hadn't been there the night before. Plain, white, no envelope. Just a single line, written in a hand too large for any child. Almost shaky, like the muscles weren't used to forming letters anymore. It said, E.I. remember you. No name, no date. The ink was still wet when I touched it. I never told the others. I folded it once, placed it in my coat pocket, and carried it with me all the way home. Back in Anchorage, the world felt strange, smaller. Too easy to navigate. Lights felt too bright. Traffic too loud. People too unaware. I stood in the hallway for hours that first night, staring at the door to his old room. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. Because I understood now. He hadn't run away. He had returned to something that was waiting before I ever carried him. Before I ever screamed in the cold. Before I ever looked into that cave and saw the truth of what this world still hides. Whatever he is now, he is not lost. Not anymore. But sometimes, when the wind rattles the windows just right, when the lights flicker in the early evening, and I catch the scent of pine that has no business being in the house, I think he's still near. Still watching. Still remembering. And maybe, somewhere deeper in the wild, he's wondering if I remember too. I do. There are stories we tell because they entertain. Others because they frighten. But then there are the stories that live somewhere deeper. Stories we carry not in our minds, but in our bones. The ones that don't beg to be believed, only remembered. This was never about proving what's out there. It's about what's in us, the need to understand what we fear. The longing to find meaning in the wildness we've tried to fence off and forget. It's about the way love endures, even when shaped by forces we can't explain. About how memory, real or imagined, can echo through blood, through land, through time. We spend our lives chasing clarity, yet the most powerful truths rarely come in perfect shapes. Sometimes they come in silence, in instinct, in the things that move just beyond the edge of light. Sometimes they come in the form of a question we're not ready to ask, or a place we promised ourselves we'd never go back to. But there's a kind of strength in that mystery, a quiet grace in not having all the answers, because not everything that's hidden is meant to stay lost, and not every ending means we've reached the end. Some stories just keep breathing. So wherever you are, in the quiet of a small town, the edge of the forest, or somewhere between the known and the unknown, if this story found you, Maybe it's because a part of you already knew that wonder doesn't need proof, that pain can be a kind of bridge, and that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin not with understanding, but with remembering. If this story moved you in any way, if it stirred something you couldn't quite name, I'd love to hear what stayed with you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Share it with someone who still believes there's more to this world. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps them reach the hearts that need them most. Thank you for listening with more than just your ears, for feeling with more than just your heart. We'll meet again, somewhere between truth and tale.